Over the past 20 years, the computer has dramatically changed the image of all types of information in all areas, with the exception of financial reporting information. Who came up with that crazy idea of dividing financial reporting into primary statements and notes? Electronic tools can provide the user with the ability to choose any desired aggregation level in any part of the reporting and shift this level at their own discretion. While the most common format of financial reporting is PDF, the one specially created to simulate hard copy. If financial reporting does not say goodbye to its paper image in the coming years, investors will simply stop using it for making economic decisions, preferring other more convenient sources of information adapted to the digital age. COVID-19, which forced everyone to master remote communications, is not just a signal to change the agenda. This is the last call for the IASB to change the agenda. The International Accounting Standards Board is seeking feedback on the exposure draft, general presentation and disclosures. Okay, I'm happy to give some comments on it. I'm not going to go through all the 14 questions that the board asks respondents to answer. I just want to share a general impression. It means to answer the last 14th question. Do you have any other comments on the proposals in the exposure draft, including the analysis of the effects and illustrative examples accompanying the exposure draft? Yes, I do have other comments. First of all, the scope of the proposed changes in IS-1 does not justify replacing the entire standards with a new one. The proposed changes relate only to local issues. Do I agree with them? Perhaps yes. With a few exceptions, yes. But on the condition that they are amendment to the existing IS-1. Instead, however, I see the exposure draft on the new IFRS. Do I agree with it? Absolutely disagree. Because if the goal of the project is not just several selective changes, but the revision of the standard as a whole, then we need to change the agenda. Definitely need to change the agenda. Imagine you have a very old car. You have been driving it for 30 years, making repairs from time to time. And now, when you once again turn to the car service to fix a few problems, you are offered to change your old car for a new one. Good idea, you think, and agree. And after a while, you get back your old car painted in a new color with fixed problems. Why? You promised me a new car and you are returning the old one again. No, they assure you. This is a new car, don't doubt it. When I read the exposure draft, general presentation and disclosures, I feel like a cheated customer of such a car service. The existing IS-1 is full of provisions that were invented in the 90s and included in the first edition of IS-1 in 1997. They have changed since in detail, but not in the main content. And now I see them again in the 2020 exposure draft. Those provisions require revision urgently. Of course, not because they are just old. No, they require revision because they are built on the assumption that financial statements are prepared, presented and used on paper media, not on a computer. This is the main reason why most common format of financial reporting is PDF. Why today's financial reporting user is not able to access any of the vast array of information visualization tools that the digital era has created. In all other information areas, users actively use these facilities, but they are practically forbidden for financial reporting information. Here is a good example, the question 8 of the exposure draft. Rows of the primary financial statements and the notes, aggregation and disaggregation. Where did this question come from at all? Why do we need to solve such problems today in 2020? As an analogy, we can imagine a discussion about geographical maps. Let's say we intend to make a map of the UK. We think what scale would be more appropriate for the map user. If we take the scale of 1 million, the map will be relatively detailed, but it will have to be folded many times, not very convenient for traveling. If you choose a scale of 2 millions, the map will be 4 times smaller, much easier to fold, more convenient to take with you, but much less detailed. This can be quite an interesting discussion if the subject is a paper map. But what if we discuss an electronic map? Is the question of scale still relevant? Not at all. The user will zoom in or delete the map as he wants, and it is convenient for him. The same question is the aggregation of information in financial reporting. I could try to answer question number 8 of the ED if we agree that we are referring to reporting on paper or in a format simulating a hard copy such as PDF. But I cannot discuss the aggregation question seriously if we are referring to an electronic form of reporting, because it is absurdly, ridiculously, no aggregation should be preset by reporting preparers. They can and must grant this privilege to the user of financial reporting. Electronic tools can provide the user with the ability to choose any desired aggregation level in any part of the reporting and shift this level at their own discretion. The same question is about the primary financial statements and the notes. Returning to the map of UK. Imagine we want to provide the user with maps of British cities and discuss how to make insets in the corners of the country map. What cities? London, of course, only Greater London or the central part as well, then Birmingham, Manchester, maybe Oxford, not big enough, but go to the university? No, Cambridge will be offended. Interesting discussion, isn't it? Yes, if the paper map is under consideration. For an electronic map, the question itself becomes irrelevant. The user switches from a map of the UK to a map of a city by simply zooming in. According to the IASB, the proposals in the exposure draft aim to improve how information is communicated in the financial statements. Good damn question! How is it communicated? In paper format? On A4 sheets? Apparently, the board, when preparing the AD, imagines only this way of communication. Because for computer communication, many of the proposed improvements are irrelevant. Who came up with that crazy idea of dividing financial reporting into primary statements and notes? Someone who lived in a time when financial statements were only on paper. In those days, someone also came up with the idea of printing an index of geographical names and related information on the back of the map, or publishing it as a separate booklet. Then came the computer and the internet. What happened to those indexes? Few people remember them today, because in modern navigation systems, in order to find out information about a geographical object, you just hover your mouse or finger. You don't even need to click. All the necessary windows open themselves. And what happened to these notes to financial statements when the computer and the internet came? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. They're still with us. All these separate pieces of separate pages. Even the XBRL doesn't help. I'm looking at illustrative examples. Paragraph IE6, Statement of Profit or Loss. The second column, Notes. It contains the numbers of the notes, 1, 2, 3. This seems to be an example from a school book of economic history. Look, children, how primitive financial reports were once. What fun techniques our ancestors used in the pre-computer era. One might be surprised that this is not a book of economic history. This is an exposure draft of 2020, which should become a standard in 2021, with an effective date in 2023 or even later. We definitely need to change the agenda. Now the board is actively engaged in solving problems related to COVID-19. Look at the list of issues. How to account for COVID-19 related rent concessions such as rent holidays and temporary rent reductions, and something like that. Of course, in the struggle between urgent and important issues, the urgent ones always win, but important ones also need to be addressed. The main effect of COVID-19 that we are facing now and will face more and more in the long term is remote relationships, remote communications, remote information circulation. We see now how the board could work remotely. All meetings have become virtual. Everything is transforming. Everything is digitalizing. And what about the thing for the sake of which the board exists? What about the financial reporting? Shouldn't it also be transformed? More precisely, how should the requirements of IFRS for financial reporting be transformed due to the fact that reporting becomes electronic? The reporting is prepared in electronic form, presented in electronic form, and most importantly, used in electronic form. It is a very tricky term, electronic financial reporting. Of course, I can prepare statements in New York, then send them to London or Beijing, and you will look at them in your office or even at home, as you see me now on your screen. But it is not, in fact, the electronic reporting. Do you feel any difference between reporting which you see on your screen and which you see on paper? I never found any difference. Image on the screen and a hard copy look identical. But why? Over the past 20 years, the computer has dramatically changed the image of all types of information in all areas, with the exception of financial reporting information. For example, geographical information. Compare the poor traveler of 20 years ago with today's lucky one. A paper map or atlas of all days is absolutely incomparable with modern navigation software. I can travel through all the streets of London right now, visit any landmark, see Canary Wharf and watch Columbus building from a bird's eye view, and all that without leaving my comfortable couch at home. But why on earth cannot I travel in the same way through the financial position and financial performance of an entity? Why the most common format of financial reporting is PDF, the one specially created to simulate hard copy? Well, what about XBRL? Financial reporting has its own digital language. Wow! Have you ever heard of a special digital language for electronic maps, for example? I haven't. I just use electronic maps and feel 100 times happier than with a printed atlas. But this is reckless. How can you master modern information technologies without having a special electronic language? Financial reporting is a different matter. It is a very serious thing. It doesn't matter that no user has yet seen any convenience of electronic reporting compared to hard copy, but every user of financial reporting knows instead about the existence of the XBRL. Who has seen financial reporting prepared using XBRL? Maybe you know the EDGAR, the resource of U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, where financial statements of registered companies are collected. See what they look like. It is not PDF, but very little difference with PDF. The only advantage is that everything is collected in one system. However, when you look at the reports themselves, you do not feel any additional comfort compared to if you were flipping through paper pages. You can press the line property, plant and equipment a dozen times and crash it completely, but nothing will happen. No Sesame will open. In order to find out something hidden in the reporting about PPE, you need to flip through the pages in search of notes in the same way as investors of the last millennium scrolled through them. The only difference is you don't need to draw your fingers now. Of course, in a pandemic, it is better not to touch the mucous membranes. There are no other differences. So, what's wrong with financial reporting information? Why can't the computer digest it and split it out on my screen in exactly the same picture that many years ago an unhappy investor of the Great Depression looked at before shooting himself? There are several reasons for this. I will not list all of them because I want to focus only on one of them, perhaps the most important, the requirements of IFRS. The standards are full of provisions that were initially based on the premise of preparing financial reporting as an album of paper pages. They have not changed since. Definitely, they should be revised. COVID-19 is not the root cause of why humanity refuses paper media and converts information into electronic form. The COVID is just an accelerator of this process. Financial reporting is already far behind other information areas. Financial statements are gradually turning from a source of useful information to formal legal documents. Regulators and courts are becoming their main users, while investors are losing interest in this official reporting due to the inconvenience of using it for making economic decisions. Who is the beneficiary of IFRS? Investors or the regulators? I'm aware of the tremendous work done within the Primary Financial Statements project, and I respect this work very much. At the same time, we have to recognize that a significant part of the project scope issues is not relevant for electronic financial reporting. The problem is not limited to aggregation issues and division into separate statements and notes. There are many other provisions that are not adequate for electronic reporting. I understand that it takes time to rework them properly. As a first and urgent measure, the board should include a clause at the beginning of the IS-1 that goes something like this. Paragraphs such and such of this standard apply only to financial statements in hard copy or in electronic hard copy equivalents. An entity is not required to apply these paragraphs to financial reporting in electronic form when it uses visualization tools that allow reporting users to compose and structure the reporting information at their own discretion. Unfortunately, in addition to IS-1, most other IFRSs also contain such provisions that are only suitable for paper format. Those standards should also be provided with similar clauses. If financial reporting does not say goodbye to its paper image, in the coming years, investors will simply stop using it for making economic decisions, preferring other, more convenient sources of information, adapted to the digital age. Financial statements do contain useful information, but due to their binding to paper formats, this information is extremely inconvenient to use, on the verge of being impossible to use. Every time the author of a standard thinks about some provision, he should forget about the paper format, about PDF, and imagine instead a computer screen where hyperlinks work, windows open one in another, lines and sublines unfold, etc., etc., etc. He should imagine not a set of stiff bureaucratic statements, but an integral information system where the user can compose and structure information at his own discretion, where the user does not look at a rigid image imprinted in granite by an accountant, but displays the image on the screen in the form that is convenient for him. In recent years, the board seems to be mired in now local issues. It has lost the ability to see the forest behind the trees. COVID-19, which forced everyone to master remote communications, is not just a signal to change the agenda. This is the last call for the IASB to change the agenda.